I won't support you. Not today. Not ever. My mother's voice rang through the mic at my wedding, sharp as glass. Guests froze mid-toast. I smiled instead of breaking. I leaned toward her steady and said, "Good, because I came prepared to live without you." The room buzzed confused whispers rising like static. I felt my grandmother's ring burn warm on my finger, as if it knew a secret waiting to surface. What no one at those tables realized was that my mother's words weren't just cruel. They lit the fuse on years of betrayal, lies about inheritances and choices that would leave her exposed. And I was ready to show everyone exactly what she had been hiding. My name is Emily Parker. I'm 27, a third-grade teacher in Seattle, and if you asked anyone who knew me, they'd probably say, I'm patient, quiet, maybe too forgiving. I've been told I don't cause trouble. That's true. At least it was true until my wedding day. I grew up in a family that pretended to shine. On the outside, we were respectable. My dad worked long shifts at the port. My mom, Linda, was the sharp, organized type who always looked like she was headed to a board meeting even when she was just going to the grocery store. I had an older sister, Amber. She was the golden child, the one everyone bragged about. And then there was me, the one who blended in, who handled chores, who earned good grades no one noticed. When Amber turned 16, Mom and Dad surprised her with a used Jeep, wrapped with a red bow in the driveway. Everyone cheered. I clapped too, even though my stomach nodded. 2 years later, when I turned 16, I got a folded check for $500 and a warning, don't waste it. I told myself it didn't matter that I wasn't the type who needed gifts to feel loved. But the truth is, that moment carved a line in me that never fully healed. There were so many lines like that. Thanksgiving dinners where Amber's pie store, bought and still in its plastic container, got more praise than the mashed potatoes I peeled and boiled myself. Birthdays where my name was scribbled in a card, afterthought while Amber got jewelry boxes with velvet lining. Small things that added up until I could barely count them. But there were also small moments of rescue. My grandmother Margaret lived with us for a while. She was quieter than Mom, but she noticed everything. One rainy afternoon when I was 10, Mom forgot to pick me up from the bus stop. I stood there in the drizzle backpack, soaked shivering until the sky turned black. When Grandma pulled up in her old Buick, she wrapped me in a blanket and slipped a silver ring into my palm. "This belonged to my mother," she whispered. "When you wear it, remember you deserve to be loved no matter what anyone says. That ring never left me. Even on my wedding day, hidden under lace, it was there, pressing against my skin like a promise." Seattle has a way of making memories stick. The damp air, the smell of cedar after rain, the sound of fairies in the distance, all of it fused with my childhood. I'd sit on the porch listening to seagulls cry while inside Mom bragged about Amber's grades. If I came home with straight A's, she'd say, "That's expected from you." If Amber came home with a C+, it was frozen yogurt night. By the time I met David, I was used to being the steady one. He was gentle, a software engineer with a love for old jazz records, and a crooked smile that made me feel like someone finally saw me. When we got engaged, Mom seemed pleased, but not because of me, because David's family had money. "This will elevate you," she said, as if I were a project she could market. She promised to help with the wedding. "Of course, we'll contribute," she said, her manicured hand brushing it off like it was obvious. So David and I booked the hotel ballroom, ordered catering, put deposits down. Then 2 months before the ceremony, Mom called. "We've decided not to put money into this. Amber's tuition is priority," just like that. I stared at the phone, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. David squeezed my shoulder, said we'd figure it out, but I knew what it meant once again. Amber's wants mattered more than my milestones, so we borrowed. Credit cards, small loans, extra tutoring shifts after school. I spent late nights grading papers, eyelids heavy, imagining the bills piling up. My wedding, the one day meant to be joyful, was already laced with resentment and fatigue. And it wasn't just money. Mom tried to control every detail of the menu. Fish is too cheap. Do lamb the dress. That neckline looks modest. Maybe too modest, the guest list. Don't invite your friend Rachel. She's too loud. When I pushed back, she smiled coldly. "Remember who's supporting this?" She said it like a warning. The irony is she never planned to support me at all. Amber, of course, thrived in this chaos. She'd walk into planning sessions sipping lattes, offering comments like, "If it were my wedding, I'd do roses not peonies, knowing it cut." She loved being the star even when it wasn't her stage. And Mom let her. Sometimes I wondered if Amber even noticed how sharp her words were, or if cruelty just came naturally. My father hovered at the edges, silent hands in pockets. He'd nod at Mom's decisions, mutter something about keeping peace. I used to hope he'd stand up for me just once, but he never did. His silence became another voice telling me I didn't matter. By the week of the wedding, I felt like I was walking into battle more than celebration. The Seattle rain pounded steady gray clouds hanging low. Inside the hotel, florists arranged peonies and lilies, the smell thick in the air. Waiters rehearsed trays of salmon and garlic mashed potatoes. Guests arrived in semi-formal dresses and suits, chatter filling the lobby. And through it all, Mom carried herself like the queen of the event. She wore navy silk pearls at her throat, smiling like she owned the night. I carried the ring in my pocket, twisting it between my fingers before slipping it on. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was memory survival, a tether to someone who once believed in me. It reminded me that family didn't have to mean cruelty. It could mean protection, love, even justice. What no one knew that night was how close I was to breaking. Every small injustice, every ignored achievement, every time I'd been told to be quiet, to be grateful, it all sat inside me like packed dynamite. And my mother's decision to cut funding wasn't the last straw. Her words into the microphone would be, because the truth is, the wedding wasn't the beginning of the war. It was the public stage where years of betrayal finally came due. And standing in that ballroom with the rain tapping glass and candles flickering against mirrored walls, I already knew something was about to snap. And once it did, nothing in our family would ever look the same again. The thing about betrayal is it rarely explodes all at once. It drips, slow, relentless, like a faucet you can't fix until one morning the sink has overflowed and the whole floor is ruined. That's how my mother's favoritism worked. After high school, when Amber left for college, Mom bragged endlessly about her. She's majoring in business. She's going places. Every family dinner turned into a slideshow of Amber's triumphs, real or imagined. When I got into the University of Washington, full scholarship, nobody clapped. Dad muttered, "Good, saves us money." Mom said, "That's expected from you." Amber came home for Christmas with stories about frat parties, boys who chased her professors, who just adored her. Mom laughed at every word like it was gospel. If I tried to talk about my classes, the conversation slipped away like soap in water. One night after dessert, Amber casually announced, "Oh, by the way, I crashed my car." My heart sank picturing the Jeep bent on some street corner. Dad sighed, but Mom waved it off. "We'll handle it." 2 months later, Amber had another car, a newer model. When I asked for help buying books, Mom looked at me over her glasses. "Can't you figure things out on your own?" That was the rhythm of my life. Amber demanded, I sacrificed. Amber stumbled, I steadied. Amber was praised, I was invisible. The humiliations weren't always loud. Sometimes they were whispered. Like the time Mom pulled me aside during Thanksgiving prep knife in my hand, sweet potatoes half peeled. She hissed, "Don't embarrass us by talking about your job. Nobody cares about kids and crayons." Then she walked out, leaving me to mash silently while Amber poured wine and basked in compliments. I held it in because that's what I always did. I told myself, keep peace, keep quiet, don't make trouble. But each silence carved a wound deeper and deeper. I remember New Year's Eve, my senior year. The living room smelled of smoke and champagne. Balloons sagged in corners. Everyone sang and danced. Mom ordered me into the kitchen. "Clean up before guests see this mess." I scrubbed dishes while Amber clinked glasses with cousins, her voice ringing above the music. Midnight came, the countdown echoed, and I stood with my hands in suds, watching confetti fall outside the window, alone. I told myself it didn't matter. That was my role. But part of me knew it was killing me slowly. When David and I started dating, I thought things might change. He was kind, steady, the kind of man who listened. But the more serious we got, the more Mom found ways to undercut me. "He's out of your league," she'd murmur. "Don't get too comfortable." She never said it where he could hear. Only to me, so it burned quiet private. During wedding planning, her control sharpened. Every choice I made was wrong. "That dress makes you look washed out. Those flowers are cheap. Don't invite your friend Rachel, she laughs too loud." She wanted a stage, not a ceremony, and Amber fed the fire. "Honestly, Em, if I were you, I'd just let Mom handle it. You're not good at this kind of thing." Sometimes I'd go home after meetings, drop onto the couch, and cry into David's shoulder. He'd rub my back, whisper, "We'll get through it." But even he didn't know the years behind it, the weight of all the tiny betrayals stacked on top of one another. Money was another knife. Mom's promise to fund the wedding dissolved overnight. Amber's tuition is priority. Just like that. Never mind that I was working 2 jobs to cover my own schooling years ago. Never mind that David and I were already stretched thin. We borrowed, scraped, hustled. And all the while, Mom paraded Amber as proof of her good parenting. One night, sitting in our apartment, bills spread like a battlefield on the table, David asked, "Why don't you just cut them off? I couldn't answer." Part of me feared losing them completely. The other part, maybe the bigger part, still craved their approval, even after everything. That craving is the cruelest part of favoritism. You keep hoping one more good grade, one more achievement, one more sacrifice will finally earn you a seat at the table. But it never does. The week before the wedding, tension grew thick. Mom called daily, criticizing details. Amber joked about stealing the spotlight with her new dress. I laughed on the phone, but my chest tightened each time. The rehearsal dinner was the breaking point before the breaking point. We sat in a private room at a steakhouse. The air smelled of butter and charred beef. Candles flickered, guests toasted. Then Mom leaned across the table, her voice low but sharp. "Don't expect me to stand up for you tomorrow. You made your bed." Amber snickered. "Don't trip walking down the aisle." Everyone chuckled, thinking it was harmless sibling teasing. I smiled too, but inside I was shaking. That night in our hotel room, I stared at the ring on my finger, tracing the grooves with my thumb. I remembered being 10, drenched at the bus stop, Grandma's voice, "You deserve to be loved." I whispered it to myself like a prayer. The morning of the wedding, rain streaked the windows, the city draped in gray. The ballroom smelled of lilies and candle wax. I slipped into my satin dress, slid the ring on, and breathed deep. I told myself, whatever happens today, I won't break. Not in front of them, but the truth. By the time Mom grabbed that microphone, I was already cracked. Years of silence were pressing against my ribs, begging to be let out. Her words didn't surprise me. They confirmed everything I'd known all along. And in that moment, holding my bouquet, eyes burning under the lights, I realized something I had never allowed myself to think before. Maybe I didn't need her approval at all. Maybe I was done waiting. What nobody expected, what even I didn't fully know yet, was how far I'd go once I decided I was finished playing quiet. The ballroom glowed 2 bright chandeliers, throwing gold light across linen tables. Rain pressed steady against the windows, streaks like veins in glass. Guests lifted champagne forks, hovered. That's when Mom's voice cut through the mic. "I won't support you. Not today. Not ever." The words cracked the room like a whip. Laughter died mid-breath. Someone coughed, awkward and loud. My bouquet sagged in my hands. For one dizzy second, I almost believed her again, like I was 10 years old, shivering at the bus stop, waiting for someone to remember me. But I wasn't 10 anymore. I set the flowers on the head table, straightened the glass in front of me. The silver ring on my finger pulsed warm. "Good," I said, voice calm, carrying farther than I expected, "because I came prepared to live without you." Gasps rippled. Guests leaned closer, straining. Mom's smile didn't falter, but her eyes flared sharp as glass. Amber shifted beside her, lips curling. "You've always been ungrateful," Mom fired back, still holding the mic. "Everything you have came from us." I shook my head. Everything I have, I earned. You just never saw it." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Even the band froze, instruments dangling useless. Then from the corner a chair scraped. My grandmother, small but steady, stood. Her voice wavered but carried. "That's enough, Linda." All heads turned. Grandma rarely spoke in public and never against Mom, but she walked forward, cane tapping the marble floor until she reached the stage. She faced the guests, her pearl earrings trembling. "I have stayed quiet too long," she said. "But tonight, the truth belongs to Emily." Mom's jaw tightened. "Mother, sit down." Grandma ignored her. She pulled a folded envelope from her purse. Her hands shook, but her gaze was steady. "This," she said, holding it high, "is the real will, the one Linda didn't want you to see." The room erupted in murmurs. I felt my breath hitch, every nerve in my body alive. Mom lunged forward. "Stop this!" But Grandma's voice cut her off. "The Parker house and land belong to Emily, not Amber, not you. That's what your father and I decided, and I won't let lies steal it." My knees went weak. I clutched the table edge nails, biting into the cloth. For years, Mom had dangled that house like a prize I'd never win, telling me Amber was the heir. Now here was the truth, blazing under the chandeliers. Amber shot up from her chair, face red. "You're lying." Grandma turned calm as rain. "Check the lawyer's seal. Ask the notary. It's all there." The envelope trembled in her hand, but the power behind it was unshakable. Guests whispered louder shock, rolling like thunder. David slid his hand into mine under the table, squeezing hard. Mom tried to snatch the envelope. Grandma held firm. "You've humiliated her long enough," she said, voice breaking. "Tonight it ends." My throat burned. Words rose unbidden, sharp and final. I stood facing the room. My mother wanted to shame me. Instead, she shamed herself. I don't need her support. I have my own future, and now everyone here knows it. For a heartbeat, the entire ballroom went still. Candles flickered. Rain hammered glass. You could hear someone's watch ticking. Then voices swelled, cousins murmuring, an aunt shaking her head, David's parents glaring at Mom. The tide was shifting, and she knew it. Her face drained, pale smile, frozen eyes darting. Amber sat, hard arms crossed, seething. I felt taller, lighter. Years of swallowed silence were leaving me one truth at a time. But inside, I also knew this was only the start. The will was proof, but retaliation was coming. Mom wouldn't forgive exposure. She would claw twist, rewrite the story, and I had to be ready. The night didn't end in laughter. It ended in fractured conversations, guests whispering on their way out, rain slicking the streets outside. I held David's hand, the ring on my finger, hot against my skin, and thought tonight the balance changed. They believed they could erase me. But the truth was out now, and nothing. Not Mom's denial, not Amber's anger, not years of silence could stuff it back into the dark. The only question left was how far would they go to take it back, and how far was I willing to go to finally keep what was mine? After the wedding, I woke to silence that felt heavier than noise. The hotel room curtains leaked gray light, the smell of wilting lilies still clinging to my hair. David slept beside me, chest rising steady, but my mind buzzed with the weight of last night. The truth was out. Grandma had dropped the bomb. But truth doesn't fix everything. Truth demands work. The first call came at 9 a.m. Mom's voice sharp as ice. "You humiliated me. Fix it." I hung up before she finished. The phone rang again, then again. By noon, 30 missed calls. I turned it face down on the dresser. Instead, I drove to Grandma's. Her little craftsman house smelled like cinnamon and mothballs. She held my hands tight, the silver ring pressing between us. "I couldn't stay quiet anymore," she whispered. "Your mother's lies were eating this family alive." We sat at her kitchen table, steam rising from chipped mugs of tea. She slid the envelope toward me again. "It's yours. The will is valid." I checked with the lawyer. I opened it slowly, the papers crackling like fire. My name stared back at me in black ink, sealed with the notary's mark. The Parker house and land weren't theirs to flaunt anymore. They were mine. But I knew Mom. She wouldn't surrender. She'd spin, manipulate, poison the story. That night, I called the lawyer myself. His voice was calm, steady. Everything checks out. If they try to contest, we'll be ready. The days that followed felt like walking through smoke. Mom flooded relatives with messages Emily is destroying the family. Amber posted smiling photos online with captions like, "Some people don't value loyalty." Comments trickled in half-truths, spreading like mold. But I didn't fight back with noise. I built proof. I kept every text, every voicemail. I forwarded them to the lawyer. I called the bank to confirm deeds. I photographed documents, stored copies in cloud drives. Each action was quiet, methodical, like stacking bricks into a wall they couldn't climb. David stood by me through it all. At night, he'd hold me while I stared at the ceiling. "You're not alone anymore," he'd whisper. That was my anchor. The hardest part was Dad. He showed up one evening, shoulders slumped in the rain. He stood on our porch, water dripping from his coat. "Emily," he said softly, "your mother's upset. Can't we smooth this over?" I looked at him, this man who had watched my whole childhood unfold in silence. "You had 30 years to smooth it over," I said. His eyes dropped. He left without another word. The backlash grew nastier. Mom called my school, hinting to the principal that I was unstable. She tried to smear me where I worked. But my principal had been at the wedding. She saw it herself. She shut Mom down before the lies could spread. Amber texted once, "You don't deserve that house. You'll ruin it like you ruin everything." I stared at the words, thumb hovering. Then I typed back one line. "This time, you don't get to take what's mine." That was the shift. I wasn't begging for their love anymore. I was drawing lines. Weeks later, I met with the lawyer again. Papers signed, titles transferred, my name on deeds that had been dangled like bait my whole life. I walked out of that office into cold Seattle air, the sky washed clean after rain. For the first time, I breathed without weight pressing down. Mom tried one last move. She showed up at the house, storming up the porch like she still owned it. "You think this makes you powerful?" she spat. "You'll regret crossing me." I held the door frame steady. "No," I said. "I regret waiting this long." Her face twisted. She turned heels, clacking down the steps, rain spitting against her silk coat. Watching her retreat, I felt nothing but a quiet finality. That winter, David and I moved into the house. It smelled like old wood and dust, but to me it smelled like freedom. We painted walls, planted herbs in the kitchen window. The neighbors brought casseroles. Slowly, the bitterness seeped out, replaced by something gentler. But justice isn't just winning property. Justice is finally refusing to be erased. For years, I let silence choke me. Now each small choice, blocking a call, ignoring a smear, holding my head high, was a victory. Mom and Amber still rage in their corner of the family. Cousins whisper, uncles shake heads. But the tide has turned. People saw the truth at my wedding. They can't unsee it. Late at night, I sit by the window, the ring warm on my hand, and I think of Grandma's words, "You deserve to be loved." For the first time, I believe them. The Parker name used to mean shame to me. Now it means something else. It means I survived. And I know this, they can claw, they can smear, they can burn bridges, but they can't take back what's mine, not anymore. Spring came slow that year. The house creaked with every wind gust, but it was mine. David and I spent weekends painting rooms, laughter echoing where silence once lived. The backyard, overgrown for years, started sprouting life again. Herbs in clay pots, daffodils pushing through damp soil. I'd walk through the halls at night, bare feet on cold wood, and feel something strange peace. Not the fragile peace of keeping quiet to avoid conflict, real peace, the kind that grows when you stop begging people to treat you right. Mom and Amber stayed distant. Rumors still floated how I stole what wasn't mine, how I'd regret turning on family. But they never came near the house again. They couldn't. Their power broke the night Grandma held up that will. And even though the wounds remain, I finally understood their love had always been conditional. Their approval, a leash. Grandma passed a few months later. I found her handwriting in a drawer in the upstairs bedroom. A note on yellowed paper, folded small, live for yourself. That's the inheritance I wanted you to have. I pressed it to my chest and cried. Not because I was broken, but because someone had seen me all along. Now when I stand on the porch in the cool Seattle evening's rain misting under streetlights, I don't feel erased anymore. I feel grounded, strong. The silver ring glints on my hand, a reminder of the child I was and the woman I became. Some nights, I wonder if Mom ever lies awake replaying that moment with the microphone. Maybe she regrets it. Maybe not. It doesn't matter, because her words didn't define me. My response did. For anyone listening, I'll tell you this family isn't always safe. Blood doesn't guarantee love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, claim what's yours, and choose peace over permission. I used to think silence kept me safe. Now I know silence only kept me small. The day I stopped waiting for their support was the day I finally stood tall. And if you've ever been humiliated by your own blood, if you've ever been told you don't deserve better, remember this, you do. You always did. So let me ask you, what would you do if your own parent tried to humiliate you on your wedding day? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And thank you so much for staying with me until the end.